value from success, growth in discovery. Golden Arrow Resources is a well-funded gold-copper exploration company with proven management and prospective properties in Chile, Argentina, and Paraguay. Golden Arrow trades on the Toronto Venture Exchange, symbol GRG, on Frankfurt, symbol G6A, and the OTCQB, symbol GARWF. For more information, visit us at goldenarrowresources.com or call Sean at 778-686-0135.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Hilliard MacBeth, author of the second edition of the book, When the Bubble Burst, Surviving the Canadian Real Estate Crash. He's also a portfolio manager and financial advisor in Edmonton. Welcome back to the show, Hilliard.
Nice to be inside talking to you rather than outside with the minus 40 wind chill we got right now.
And maybe for people, especially folks who say grew up in Vancouver or in the southern states, explain what happens when it's minus 40, which is the same in Fahrenheit and Celsius.
Yeah, we took the dog out and we rode for 12 or 15 minutes. And by the time we got back, our face was frozen. And, of course, you have to take your gloves off to pick up the business the dog has to do. And so by the time you get back after 12, or maybe it was 15 minutes, hands and face were pretty well frozen. But if there hadn't been any wind, it wouldn't be that bad. It's minus 40 with zero wind, you could stay out longer. But there was actually quite a wind this morning for some reason. Usually there's no wind when it's minus 40.
Yeah, and when I was a kid back in the 60s, we had minus 65 in Peace River. And minus 65, it's like being in outer space. Propane becomes a liquid. Gasoline becomes a jelly. The oil in your car will freeze solid. So you have to take a blowtorch and carefully warm up the oil pan. And then once you get your vehicle started, you have to keep it running or all the moisture from the exhaust will freeze and crack your exhaust pipe and the block of the engine.
Wow.
Yeah, so you need two sets of keys. One, you start the car so it can warm up, and then you lock the door with the second set of keys. It's quite tremendous. And I remember the recreation, pull down your scarf and spit, and it goes crack because it freezes in midair. I bet you could go out with a cup of coffee right now in Edmonton and throw it up in the air, and it'll spray into ice and make a nice pattern you can take a picture of.
For sure you would, and this is the middle of the city, so if you went out, if we went 15 kilometers outside of Edmonton, it would be colder, but I don't know how much colder, probably maybe 10, maybe minus 50 wind chill or something, but...
Sure, and
but of course,
here in the greater Vancouver area, even though it's going down to minus 7 or something overnight, we still have flowers blooming along the waterfront.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
So, of course, if you got your electric car, like I do, you can just turn on the phone. You just turn your phone on and get the app and turn on the heat in the car. And even though it's minus 40 outside, within probably takes a little bit longer. I was going to say 4 minutes, which is normal. Probably more like 10 or 12 minutes to warm up the car. So, much easier to manage in the winter with an electric than it is combustion car, because on the combustion car, of course, it's got to heat up the engine and the oil and the block and everything. That take quite a while. However, there is a problem with electric cars in the winter. It's a manageable problem, but the problem is that the range is much less. So at minus 40, a 500 kilometer range would probably go down to probably 300 or even 250, depending on how fast you drive. So it's the battery is less efficient in the cold weather.
How does it handle on ice and snow?
Well, it's just a car like it's got the same, it depends on tires and all that kind of stuff. It's the electric aspect. The only difference to the electric is the center of gravity is lower because the battery, the heaviest part of the car is the battery, and it's at the bottom. It's underneath the passenger compartment. So that gives it a little better handling characteristics, but other than that, it's just like a regular car.
So, because some people are saying, let's see how electric cars work in minus 40 weather. That's why you still need a gasoline or diesel. That's not really true.
It. Yeah. I mean, you can go Like normally I can go to Calgary quite easily from Edmonton because it's about 360 or 70, whatever it is, kilometers, and the car has a range of 500. So there'll be 100 left over when I get there. But you don't want to do it so there's like nothing left. You don't want to you want to have a cushion. So, but with this weather, and it happened once. We were coming back from Mexico and we landed at the airport in Calgary, got in the electric car. It was like this. It was minus 40, and so we stopped. There's 2 or 3 stops between Edmonton and Calgary where you can get a fast charge, and we stopped at Red Deer and topped it up because I didn't think we could make it with in that weather. So so that's it's still manageable. It's just more frequent stops probably. But the new one that's coming out, the new Tesla, is called the Plaid Plus. It's going to have an 837 kilometer range. So that one would be fine. It'll, even in the minus 40, it'll probably easily make 400 or 500 kilometers.
Do the Teslas have 4-wheel drive computer traction control?
Yeah, all of them have that. And, I shouldn't say all of them. Most of them have that. I think there was initially an option for 2-wheel drive, but it's, but they have in the one like this one we're talking about, they actually have 3 motors. So there's each axle has its own motors, and each axle has its own little drivetrain probably. So and it's only possible because of the computer, right? So it's a software issue more than anything else.
And speaking of Tesla, Elon Musk, through the motor company, has invested how much in Bitcoin? So
the Tesla's building up, believe it or not, even though they're building a new plant in Texas and a new plant in Berlin and expanding the plant in China and adding a battery plant near their their California plant. Even with all of that capital expenditure, they were building up cash when the stock hit $800 in December. They did a share issue, and they seem to be building up cash for they sell regulatory credits to other car makers that don't have enough clean energy cars to meet the requirements. So they took $1.5 billion of that cash and spent it on Bitcoin, which was really quite shocking to me. It's like, what is going on? But that's just Elon must be Elon, I guess. I don't know. He said that they're going to accept payment for new cars in Bitcoin. So I don't know. We'll see. I'm going to test it out because if I get the new one that's coming out with the 837 kilometer range, I want to trade in my existing one. And I'll say I want to get Bitcoin for my trade-in because I never bought any Bitcoin. So let's see if that works. It probably won't, but we'll see.
We'll have more with Hilliard MacBeth right after this.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Hilliard MacBeth. Hilliard, Bitcoin mania continues. Some people have suggested forget about being in the $40,000 range. Maybe it could hit $1 million. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, the thing about anything like this, it's the stock market's kind of in this situation right now too. Is it's contingent on an ever increasing amount of new money coming into this. It's like a Ponzi scheme in the sense that you have to keep adding new money because there's always a certain number of people that are selling. maybe in the Bitcoin it's not, mostly younger people that own it, but there's always some sales, and people that desperately need the money for some reason, or just to decide that 40,000 after they bought it for 1,000, they want to, take a 40-fold increase. So the higher it goes, the more people there'll be like that. So somebody has to come in with new money to replace the people that we're trying to get out. So and so there's a limit there. But the other limit too is it going to be adopted as an acceptable currency? I mean, Tesla says they'll accept it, but it's not really something that you can easily use as a store of value or as a medium of transaction, which is the requirement. So for now, the U.S. dollar is probably going to still be that. The euro is not really an option, and certainly the Chinese renminbi is not because of the restrictions on exchange there. So the U.S. dollar is the reserve currency still, and it probably will be for at least 10 more years. But if Bitcoin could replace that, then that would be the interesting thing. But and they do have a limit of 21 million coins that they say is the hard limit. They can't produce any more than 21 million coins. So that makes it like similar to something like gold, which is, there's no limit on gold, but it's very hard to find additional gold. So, of course, I guess there's about 18 million that have been produced so far, so there's only 3 million more to produce, and then after that, it'll become scarce. I guess that's the idea. But there's no, how far does speculation go? We've got a very frothy market right now with all kinds of assets, especially some of the top stocks in the renewable energy sector reaching levels that are really even more stretched than the dot-com bubble in 2000. So how much further can these things go? They generally, these bubbles always burst.
And the dot-com burst back in 2000, a warning for people perhaps that just because it looks hot and the future is so bright you have to wear shades, the future so often turns out to be nothing but a big black hole that disappears with all your money.
Well, the things that were being said in 1999, 2000 turned out to be generally correct. The internet was going to change the world, and all these new companies were going to use the internet to bring out new features that people would want, and that actually happened. I think about all the things like Uber and Skip the Dishes and Airbnb and all the stuff, all these applications that now it's 20 years later, they're all coming out. But that doesn't mean that the companies that are trading at the valuations in 2000 were a bargain, and they were very expensive. A lot of them just never made it. And even the ones that made it, like Cisco, for example, the network company, there's a good example of everything that people were saying about the internet was true, and Cisco was right at the center of that. So they were, but that didn't stop Cisco from going down like 90% the next 2 years. So the stock market in general went down 50% in 2.5 years. And the stocks that were really in the technology sector probably went down about 80 to 85%. So, for instance, Amazon, which is now trading for $3,200, I think, was another example of a stock that was benefiting from the internet. And it was over $50 at the peak in 2000, and it went down to $5, so it went down about 90%. And then it went from the bottom in 2002, probably is when it reached the bottom. It went up from $5 to $3,200. So people were right to buy it at $50, but it would have been better if they waited for the bubble to burst and to buy it at $5. Although in the case of Amazon, it didn't matter whether you bought it at $50 or $5. If you kept it, you still were very happy today with your Amazon stock. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the other companies, they never did make it. So everything people say about, for instance, to use the example today, which is the renewable energy sector, the batteries and the electric cars and all that, which is, these stocks we have one that's basically quadrupled in the last 6 months. This is crazy, right? And all of the things about that they're saying about these companies are probably true, but that doesn't mean that it's a good investment to buy it after it's quadrupled. It's probably not a good investment to buy it.
Another cryptocurrency grabbing headlines is Dogecoin. Now that pronunciates DOGE coin, but the inventor of it, he says it's pronounced Doge. Some people are calling it dog coin, and others are calling it dodgy.
And it's a joke. It started out as a joke. So it was like it was about 7 years ago when all of the Bitcoin thing mania first started happening. And this guy invented Dogecoin as a joke, and people are still buying it. It doesn't have the characteristics of Bitcoin where it's trying to be a serious, alternative currency. The people that are behind it admit it's totally a joke. It's not, there's no limit. Like I mentioned, there's a 21 million coin limit there's no limit on Dogecoin. But people are still buying it because they like to be in on the joke. That's the idea. They like to be part of the joke. So, and there's a whole bunch of other coins. Like there's, it would be we'd have to do a whole segment on it. I wouldn't be the right person, but there's a whole bunch of coins out there, that are trying to copy the Bitcoin phenomenon.
We'll have more with Hilliard MacBeth right after this.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlan, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Hilliard MacBeth. The Canadian housing market, for the most part, especially for single detached homes outside the city cores, appears to be doing well. What's your take?
Well, I was puzzled because I thought, the debt loads in the household and the corporate sector are just sky high. We're way ahead of all the other G8 countries. So I was doing some investigation recently, and what I'm told, which actually probably makes sense, is that it's the renters in the cities. Like, so people were trying to get out of the cities like Toronto and Vancouver, and but especially Toronto, I think is where I checked with Oshawa, for example, and prices have gone up more than 10%, or 10 to 15% for single family homes. And the average price now is about $750,000 in Oshawa, which is pretty crazy, really. And but there's you don't have to. There's no jobs really. There are not very many jobs in Oshawa. There's the car industry has been shrinking for years, but you don't have to. You can still have your job in Toronto and live in Oshawa. So what it is apparently is renters maybe are being helped by their mom and dad, and they're buying the homes out in the way out in the not suburbs. They're in far away cities in Ontario and pushing the prices up, and they're getting help from. I talked to a mortgage broker, and he said that every single application he sees now for a single family home, if it's a young couple, it's got a co-signer, probably the parents. And that's a big mistake. Like I said that in my book, don't ever co-sign. Absolutely do not do that. And yet, people, they desperately want to help their kids get out of the big city. And so that would explain, because the thing that was puzzling me was how could you own two places? Because I know that the condominiums in Toronto and Vancouver, at least for a while, were just not selling at all. You couldn't sell them. And now they're starting to sell. But for most of the last year, they were very difficult, if impossible, to sell. So how were people able to buy these new places? Well, if these were renters that were moving out, then they didn't need to sell anything because they didn't have anything to sell. And that would also explain why the rents have been plummeting. But it isn't just Toronto. New York and San Francisco and all these places, the rents are coming down quite precipitously, like 30-40% drops in rents, especially for smaller units. So it's could become affordable to live in the big city if you don't mind living in a small apartment. But for single family homes, it's everybody wants some yard or some dirt, some place to go outside and have a barbecue or whatever, and so they're willing to pay anything, I guess. And the banks, lenders are facilitating it, which is the other big surprise to me. I think that in the past, the banks were reluctant to give mortgages in small towns where there's no employment, but I guess the banks are recognizing that people can still keep their jobs but live far away from where their workplace is.
Did a lot of people use the deferred mortgage program to save up money to perhaps pay off debts or even get a down payment to move to a new and bigger house?
Well, it's interesting, because when the Canadian banks regularly put out these reports from their economics departments saying there's record savings levels in Canada. But then when you look at the more neutral kind of observers, they put out a report saying that Canadians went 80% deeper into debt over the last year during the COVID thing. So how could that be? How could both those things be true? Well, it's possible. It's a little bit convoluted, but when they got the deferral, the cash built up in their bank account. But of course, the deferral on the mortgage and the deferral on the car loan and everything is adding to their mountain of debt. So basically, they went deeper into debt in order to put cash in their bank accounts, and then now they're using that cash to go and buy houses or apartments or whatever, and or maybe they're just buying cars. They can't really go on vacations, so they're saving money that way. So it's a combination, I guess, of people spending less and getting the deferrals, but the deferrals have ended now. So we're going to see. I thought we would have seen sooner, but it's taking longer to show up to say really who actually can afford to make their mortgage payments. There's going to be a few months where, not being required to make any mortgage payments, they'll have a balance if they let it build up and they didn't blow it on something else. And then that'll give them, even if their employment isn't that great, that'll give them a few months of grace. But at some point we'll start seeing whether they actually can make those mortgage payments or not. And that'll depend on the recovery in the economy. That's the big question mark is will the jobs come back? Will they recover? In the U.S., about half of the jobs have come back, and in Canada, a little bit more than half of the jobs have come back. So that's still that were lost. And of course, the number of jobs lost in March, April last year were record high losses in jobs as a percentage of the workforce. So we're still deep in a recession.
And those job losses tended to be in the tourism, service industry, hotels, airlines.
Yeah, and also a lot of sort of lower income jobs, right? So they which it should be a negative for the housing market because, like we talked about with other things earlier, there's always got to be new money coming in because there's always people exiting the housing market. So the new people generally coming in who don't own a place, they go from renters to owners, are a big force keeping the housing market healthy. And if they're the ones that are losing their jobs, which you would think they might be, then it makes it tougher. So we'll see. That's where the co-signing the mortgage with mom and dad probably comes in to help those kids. But I just think that there's a lot of families that are putting an awful lot of their total net worth into housing in Canada, which could turn out to be a very big mistake.
How's Canada doing when it comes to running up debt to deal with the recession and the COVID crisis?
So Canada spent the most of the G8 countries. The increase in the debt to GDP ratio was 80%, and the second highest was something like 40%. This is a phenomenal amount. Now it's a ratio, so on the top is the debt, and then on the bottom is the GDP. Well, the GDP went down, so the ratio would have increased a certain amount just with the decline in the GDP if the government hadn't spent more money, or if corporations and households hadn't gone deeper into debt. But all four of those things happened. The GDP shrank by about, at the worst, it was about a 10% shrinkage. Now, for the year, it looks like it's going to be about a 5%. When the final numbers come out, it'll be about a 5% shrinkage. And on the top of the ratio, all three federal and provincial government debts are all included in that. Then corporate debts, and then household debts, and they all went up. So it's a phenomenal thing. Like in 1 year, for the ratio to go up 80%, it's just phenomenal. And most of that probably you could blame on the federal government, because the federal government went from a debt of about so they had a deficit of about $340 billion, and prior to that, their debt in the federal government was about $600 billion. So they went from rounded off to $1 trillion. So 600 to $1 trillion is about a 66% increase in the federal government debt, and so that's what was a big part of the ratio going up 80%.
Can Canada afford that?
Well, so great question. So the thing with this is, Canada can issue its own currency, the Canadian dollar. Obviously, the federal government only can do that, not the provinces or the corporations or the households. Nobody but the federal government can do it. So that gives them some safety in terms of if they need to, if they need to roll over the debts or refinance their debts, they can keep issuing the currency. And that works as long as other countries are doing the same thing. If the U.S. is doing it, if different countries are doing it all to about the same degree, then nobody's going to look at Canada and say, oh, no, they can't. That's terrible what they're doing. They're just it'll be all the same. But if Canada turns out to be the only one that's doing it, or if Canada's doing it more than everybody else, and the big risk is the U.S., if Canada ends up printing more money to finance these new debts that they've taken on, and the U.S. doesn't do that, then Canada will be in trouble. And the way that'll show up is in the Canadian dollar dropping in relation to the U.S. dollar. So far the Canadian dollar's held up really well. It's recently gone a bit below 78 cents, but it was, it's been much lower than that in the last 5 years. It's been as low as in the high, it's been under 70 cents. So it's hanging in there really well right now, and it's people are generally very positive on the Canadian dollar, I guess, as a safe place to put their money, because their interest rates are actually a little bit lower than the U.S. interest rates. So they're not coming here for the higher interest rate. It's a little bit hard to understand what's going on, but this increase in debt will probably spook a few people. It certainly will get the attention of the ratings agencies, because Canada's has one of the highest credit ratings in the world, of the larger economies, Germany being the other big country like that.
Hilliard, always a pleasure chatting with you. I hope you survive the minus 39 temperatures in Edmonton.
I don't think the dog doesn't usually beg to go for a walk anyway, but if he did, I think he's already had his walk for the day. So we'll just stay inside, look through the window, and hope that it warms up. It's supposed to warm up in about a week, so we're hoping for that.
My guest has been Hilliard MacBeth, author of the second edition of the book When the Bubble Burst, Surviving the Canadian Real Estate Crash. His website, macbethmcleodgroup.com. You can find him on Twitter at HMacB. If you have any questions for Hilliard or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@housestreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter at House Street. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of House Street Media Incorporated.